Trout Routes combine stream maps and river data to help you find fishing access faster. Be confident on the water with fishing access points, real-time stream gauges, and public access, now brought to you by Onyx Maps. Whether you're looking for blue lines, gold medal rivers, or something new in your backyard, Trout Routes has the data to get you on the water fast. Destination Angler podcast listeners can try 1 month of Trout Routes Pro for free by clicking on the link in the episode description. Do what I do and put more access in your hands and explore the water you love with Trout Routes today. This week on the Destination Angler. How do you design a trout stream?
We meet with the landowner and find out what they have as a vision for their property. You know, sometimes they want slower water and sometimes the river doesn't want slower water. So you've got to work through that process. You can kind of nudge Mother Nature's hand a little bit, but you're definitely, Mother Nature's telling you what's going to happen there. And even if you push too hard, she's going to correct it.
And that was Clint Packo in Designing Trout Streams. Hey, if you like the show, please share it with a buddy. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey, anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Adams Built Fishing Gear, the trusted source for quality fly fishing gear built to last at an affordable price. By Got Fishing, crafting world-class fly fishing adventures specially designed to your level of experience and budget. And by Trout Routes. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we venture to Idaho in the legendary South Fork of the Snake River. Then we jump over to Nevada to explore the technical waters of the Truckee River for giant trout. Be sure to backcast to catch the last episode on the Smith River. The Smith is a remote, permit-only float in central Montana that offers the fly angler a truly unforgettable multi-day experience. You won't want to miss these shows. Hey, and be sure to hit that subscribe button. Catch all the Destination Angler episodes coming your way. And now you can catch the Destination Angler podcast on YouTube. Our destination is Abell Ranch, a 1,500-acre slice of trout heaven on Colorado's South Platte River. Joining me is former guide and fifth-generation Coloradan, Clint Packo, who just may have the coolest job in the world, running Abell Ranch, brokering ranches, and restoring trout streams. Today we dive deep into Abell Ranch, 3 miles of gin-clear water, uncrowded fishing, and some of the best hopper action you'll find anywhere all summer long. And we'll answer those big questions that every fly angler has, like, how do you design a trout stream? And who drops $38 million on a ranch and makes it work? No kidding. And stick around to the end as Clint shares his secret to growing monster trout and a wild story about a cartwheeling blacktip shark on the fly. So let's fire up the bulldozer and dream big with Clint. Everybody, today our destination is Abell Ranch. It's on the South Platte in Colorado. It's a very special place, and I've got Clint Packo here. Clint, I say your last name right?
You did, yes.
Okay. Probably should have asked you that before we hit the record button.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You got it.
Clint's a super interesting guy. He's a fifth-generation Colorado resident. How about that? He's been a guide, fly shop owner, multiple fly shops, I believe, and he now owns Abell Ranch on the South Platte. It's 1,500-acre historic homestead settlement. It's the largest contiguous piece of private property on the South Platte. He also owns Shawnee Meadows and Rawhide Ranch on the North Branch of the South Platte. And that's a little closer to Denver. And he's got 2 other companies that are really interesting. A Confluence Land Company, which is it's a broker business, right? You're buying and selling ranches. Is that right?
Yeah, we represent buyers and sellers, and we do our own transactions as well.
Okay, there you go. And a company called Freestone Aquatics, which is a stream restoration company. Has anyone ever told you you've got a dream job, Clint? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I say it every day.
Every day? Yeah. You get to mess around with ranches and stream bed flows and things like that. It sounds like really like a blast. A few other really interesting things about Clint, heavily involved in conservation efforts. He sits on the TU board, I believe, for all of Colorado. Is that right?
Yeah, up until year before last, I was on their board for a long time.
Okay. Trout and Salmon Foundation, advisory board of the Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, co-founder of the Colorado Trout Foundation and the North Fork South Platte River Foundation. There's more. He personally founded and oversaw the establishment of two separate river protection foundations in Colorado. And you've been involved in long-term rehabilitation of conservation efforts on the North Fork of the South Platte and the revitalization of the Upper Colorado River and its tributaries. Man, when do you ever go fishing?
That's a good question, Steve. I don't fish very much anymore.
Oh, what?
I did fish 2 days last week at Abell, and it was great. And then, during this time of year in tarpon season, I do fish in Florida some.
Ah, okay. Are you in Florida today?
No, I'm actually in the original homestead cabin at Abell today. We're planting willows and doing a bunch of riparian vegetation work down there. So I'm at the cabin that's on the ranch.
Huh, no kidding. Well, that's fantastic. So we got a lot to talk about. Well, let's just start, maybe just talk about, the South Platte in general. I've done a couple shows on the South Platte, but I'm really curious from your take. It's world famous, lots of different sections that kind of have their own allure, so to speak. But tell me about the South Platte? What makes it so special for fly anglers?
It's really an interesting river system. It's really dynamic. It's long. It's got everything from high gradient sections to very low gradient meandering sections. There's three different sections of the South Platte, maybe four that are, world renowned, certainly within the United States. The Dream Stream, which is between Spinney and 11 Mile reservoirs. Then it goes to 11 Mile Canyon, which is downstream of 11 Mile Reservoir, and then Cheeseman Canyon, and then Deckers. And those are kind of the four notable, really notable sections of the river. But, essentially, it's special. It starts on Hoosier Pass, which is right next to the ski town of Breckenridge.
Okay.
It's a east flowing river, and it flows from Breckenridge all the way through the world famous South Park, that the cartoon's about, and
Yeah.
goes through three separate reservoirs, Antero, Spinney, and 11 Mile, then hits Cheeseman, then hits Strontia Springs Reservoir, then Chatfield Reservoir. Then it goes, all the way to the northeast corner of the state and joins the North Platte and flows east from there. But it's everything from higher gradient, like in 11 Mile and Cheeseman Canyons, to really meandery, like in the Dream Stream and Tomahawk, and through our section, like at Abell. And it's great. It's just a phenomenal river system.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it super technical throughout, or are there some areas you think are a little easier to fish?
Oh yeah, it really varies depending on pressure and also the bugs, because in most sections it has really prolific hatches. So even if the fish aren't pressured, you do see a fair bit of fish being very kind of keyed in on one pattern. Whatever they're eating, they're really eating that. And
Yeah.
so presentation needs to be good regardless of pressure, and the fish fight hard, and they're stunningly beautiful fish. And the interesting thing, because it's got so many sections that are tailwaters, is that it's got a really long angling season on it. I mean, much of the river can be fished in all 12 months of the year.
Yeah. If you don't mind below zero weather in
Yeah.
February.
All right. Yep.
You got a tip for freezing rod guides for us?
I mean, I've heard everything from butter to like Crisco and Scotch Guard, WD-40. When I was younger, I would essentially use anything I could, but I don't fish when it gets to the point where your hands are hurting. I've
Yeah,
gotten
no.
too soft in my old age to really do it. But Scotch Guard was the thing I used the most on my fly line and on my guides, and it it,
Scotch
it
guide.
tended to do pretty good.
Is that right? Okay. Well, there's always hunting season too, when it gets a little
Exactly.
cold out. So you got a lot of elk out there, don't you?
We do, and I hunt this property. That's primarily where I hunt, and it's mule deer and elk. And I've spent the majority of my childhood and adult life concentrating on fishing, so I've just become pretty keen on the hunting aspect of expanding that part of my outdoor experience.
Huh. Did you get an elk this year?
Good question. No, I just shot a mule deer last year, but then I'll do
Okay.
archery, elk and mule deer for 2025.
Okay. And how's a mule deer taste compared to a whitetail? What do you think?
Oh, I don't even think they're close. I think whitetail's so much better.
Is it really?
Well, there's going to be people that say I'm not cooking it right or whatever the case is, but I can tell you that I've only ever had good tasting whitetail, and I've had plenty of mule deer that's pretty tough to get down.
No kidding. There you go, folks. There's a tip. Anyway, so you're at Abell Ranch today in the homestead cabin. I'd love to hear about Abell. Just, once again, what makes Abell so special? It's on the south. Where is it on the South Platte?
Yeah, so 11 Mile Canyon leaves 11 Mile Reservoir flowing kind of north northeast, and it goes into a town called Lake George, which intersects with Highway 24, which is the route from Colorado Springs to South Park. And Highway 24, as the river crosses under the road, is where our upstream boundary is. And then the next 3 miles of river moving north past that is our property.
Moving north. Okay.
Yep. It's the first kind of low gradient meander section after 11 Mile Canyon.
Huh. Okay. Give me a sense of what the trout stream. I know it's a big ranch with 1,500 acres. What's the trout stream like? I mean, what's the river like there?
Yeah, so I'll give you just a brief history on the ranch and kind of our ownership, and
Yeah.
it'll describe the fishery and the river.
Yeah. Perfect.
So the river portion of the property was settled in 1875, and the original homestead cabin was donated to the town of Lake George, and it's been restored and is in Lake George. When we bought the ranch, it was about 2,000 acres, non-contiguous, I think maybe 4 or 5 parcels. A few of those parcels we've sold off, and the cabin parcel and the river are about a mile and a half apart or something like that. The homestead cabin that I'm in right now was originally built, part of it was built in 1860,
Wow.
and we've undergone a pretty extensive remodel to modernize the inside. There's a fishing guide in Denver named Chelsea Christie who painted the mural on the wall behind me of the brown trout.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so when we bought it from the homesteading family, and they used it primarily as an ag operation. So they were running a lot of cattle on it, and 166 years of grazing had done some wear and tear on the banks, and so it's a very meandering, low gradient section. I've said that a few times, but the bug life is very good, and it's a wild trout fishery, so it's predominantly brown trout with some rainbows and some cutthroats, and the water's gin clear. There isn't a meaningful tributary between 11 Mile Dam and us, so even at runoff, when the water's at 400 or 500 CFS, it's very clear and it's fishable. It's really like 10 and a half months of the year.
That's special right there. That's really neat.
It's amazing, and because of the historical grazing, there's really no overhead cover along the stream. So as part of our long-term restoration efforts, we did about $1 million worth of work in the channel, narrowing it. In some places, we narrowed it by 50% because it was too wide and shallow. And to give you an idea, last year we planted about 4,000 willow shoots. And in the last week, we've done another 7,000 willow shoots.
7,000. Wow.
Yeah, and that's across the whole 3 miles. So, and there's probably like a 3 to 5 year maturity on those before they make a meaningful difference. But, they do such a great job providing macroinvertebrate habitat after the bugs hatch, to lowering stream temps, and then holding the banks back when water's high and it wants to erode the banks. So there's a lot of benefits to it, and so we're trying to plant between 2 and 5,000 willows a year.
So right along the river, or kind of the whole riparian area?
Really, we're starting at the river, and once that gets dense enough, then we'll start kind of branching out to some of the other low-lying areas that have good hydrology that'll support them.
Yeah. Have you had any problems with, grazing deer and whatnot eating up your saplings?
Yeah, it's a good. The muskrats,
Those
you know,
two.
it's pretty disheartening. You plant all these willows, and it takes 5 of us, 2 or 3 days to plant a few thousand of them, and overnight, one muskrat can cut down, several hundred of them. So,
Really? What's the hunting season on muskrats?
yeah, well,
12
as a
months?
private landowner, you can trap them year round, and
Can you?
And, we want our vision, my partner and I's vision for Abell is that it's essentially a wildlife sanctuary. And so we want to have a very limited footprint on it. There's so much public land around and so much great habitat for muskrats that we did trap a few of them to try and just get them back a little bit for a few years so these willows can mature. And then we want them to be, flourishing and live like they would in a normal circumstance. So what we have found, interestingly, Steve, is that they don't care about the mature willows. They really love the ones that are freshly planted. And I don't have a good answer for that, but they really love the freshly planted ones.
Yeah. We tried to do some restoration work on some ponds in our neighborhood, and we put a bunch of lily pads in there, and they lasted a couple weeks. Same problem.
Yeah.
Muskrats just it's like, I don't know, it's like, celery before you have your dinner or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it must be. And the property's pretty amazing. It wasn't for sale when we bought it, and our commitment to the previous owners, the trend out west, particularly in and around the metropolitan areas out west, is to do shared amenity communities where you buy a piece of property like Abell and split it up into home sites, and then everybody has access to the river. And this property was very meaningful to them. It had supported 5 or 6 generations of their family. And so we made the commitment to them that we would make sure it was preserved in perpetuity. And we did that by completing a conservation easement on the entire river section. That was completed early 2024. And so we want it to be, it's only perimeter fenced, no cross fencing. And we want, we're in a summer and winter elk and deer habitat zone. So there's elk and deer. We want them to be able to traverse in and out of the property and move through it as easily as possible. Black bears and mountain lions are, relatively common. There's a lot of coyotes on the property. And, I just saw a bobcat last Thursday in the meadow. The geese are having goslings right now. So there's a bunch of little tiny, baby geese waddling around.
Yeah.
And it's much like fishing the South Platte in South Park, like at the Dream Stream, as far as an appearance goes.
Yeah.
It doesn't get the wind. It doesn't get the wind that South Park gets, which is great. But the fish are, on average smaller because we're not fishing quite the direct tailwater that we would be fishing below Spinney Reservoir. But the hatches are really prolific. It's a fantastic dry fly fishery.
Yeah.
I guided it on Saturday, and we just fished a dry, and it was, single dry fly, and it was really nice. So, yeah.
Sweet. Sounds amazing. Hey anglers, if you're on the hunt for fishing gear that's as tough as you are, look no further than Adams Built Fishing Gear. Since 2014, Adams Built has been the go-to choice for anglers who demand quality without breaking the bank. Their lineup of lightweight waders, high-quality nets, and meticulously designed fly boxes is second to none. But here's what really impressed me. Adams Built stands behind their products like no other. Every single item is guaranteed to last. Yep, you heard that right. And get this, Adams Built waders even come with a lifetime repair replace guarantee, with you only paying for shipping. Now that's a deal you can't beat. So why settle for gear that won't last? Make the smart choice and gear up with Adams Built Fishing Gear today. Ask your local dealer for Adams Built or visit www.adamsbuiltfishing.com and tell them Steve sent you from the Destination Angler podcast. Here's Brian Oakland, founder of Got Fishing.
There's really no reason for an angler not to use Got Fishing when everything we do for you is free. We have the best trips around the world. We only work with the best outfitters, and we're definitely going to get you the best deal and the best dates guaranteed. That's why we have clients come back time and time again. We have Don with us on this trip. This has been his 6th fishing adventure with Got Fishing, and I think if you asked him, it is because of all the little things. We don't tell people, we ask questions. What is it that you're looking for? What would be most important to you? Who's coming with you? What's your experience level? And really at the end of the day, what is the most important aspect of this experience that you're looking to take home? And then from there, we just marry them up with some of the best lodges, let them take a look at 2 or 3 different options and pick what's going to be best for them.
Well, there you have it, folks. A pretty good case for choosing Got Fishing for your next big adventure. So what are you waiting for? Give Brian a shout or visit gotfishing.com. Obviously, you're in Colorado, so you got to believe there's some mountains nearby? Can you see some of the 14ers nearby, or what's it look like?
Oh yeah, you can see Pikes Peak from the upstream third of the ranch. It's very close.
Oh, cool.
And it's, even though it's a valley, the valley floor on this section of the river is pretty narrow. So there's the mountains to the east. Immediately east is where the Hayman fire started in 2001. And
Oh,
for
sure.
many of us, the Hayman fire was until very recently, that was the most prolific forest fire in Colorado
Yeah.
history. And so there's, some of it has standing dead, but that's all revegetated pretty well. And, from on our property, it'll go from, there's probably a change in elevation of around 1,000 feet, 900 to 1,100 feet. Mostly lodgepole pine. There are some small juniper bushes and
Huh.
lots of wildflowers. And this time of year, from now till mid or late July, everything's, pretty darn green, and it's really nice.
Beautiful. How wide's the stream? What would you say?
At a kind of an average flow, it's narrow would be like 30 and wide would be 60 feet.
Oh, that's pretty, wow, that's smaller than I would have thought.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a great wading stream.
Oh, it's ideal for wading. It's small cobble, but very hard bottom. I wet wade it, even this time of year, I'm wet wading. And, no, it's very crossable. I mean, all the way up till 350 CFS, you can cross it in any number of spots on the property.
Really?
Yep.
And you limit, obviously, it's a ranch. People obviously are paying to fish there. So you really try to limit the number of anglers on there. I read that you have 3 beats, a mile each. Is that how you do it?
That's right. And we work with 5 partner outfitters. Um, we vet those outfitters, pretty extensively. And if a section is used one day or a few consecutive days, it automatically gets 2 or 3 rest days. And so our goal with
Cool.
the ranch is, my partner and I just talked about it today actually, is that if it gets to the point where there's a footpath beat down in the grass, it's getting overused.
Huh.
And we want the fish and the wildlife, as hokey as it sounds, we want them to kind of be able to live and move as they would without us influencing that very much. So that's how we try and manage it.
That's really interesting because we've all been to, most trout streams have paths next to them. You almost think there's something wrong. Why isn't anybody fishing here? If
Yep,
there isn't a footpath, there's something wrong with the fishing or what? But that's kind of the world we live in today. Yet here you've got this, sounds like you've got some solitude for anglers that, can write the check, I guess, and come out and fish with you.
yeah, and that's the purpose. And we try and keep the rod fee below market. We don't want it to be inaccessible to most anglers. We want to be able to share this place. We feel beyond blessed that we had the opportunity to become custodians of it and stewards. And so, we want people to be able to use it. And there's people that have been coming here the whole 7 years we've owned it, because they really enjoy everything between the scenery and the way it fishes. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's our goal.
And so where do you stay? You've got places for people to stay on the property?
Not on the property, but North Fork Ranch is they're one of our partner outfitters. They have lodging. For outfitters that don't have lodging, there's Mountain River Lodge right in Lake
Okay.
George. They're very nice, well-appointed cabins. And then, you're not that, I mean, we get day trip people from Colorado Springs, very frequently. So
Oh, do you? Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's from Colorado Springs to the ranch is about 35 minutes. So it's really not very far.
Yeah. And I'm sure you can find Airbnbs out there if you look hard.
Yeah, there's actually a really nice one. I just don't remember the name of it, right upstream from us, that I think it's 4 bedrooms, and it's
Yeah.
priced reasonably. It's right on the river. And yeah, it's fantastic.
What kind of trout you got on there? What's the fish profile look like?
You know, we get fish. Cheeseman Reservoir is about 12 river miles downstream from our property. And in the spring and fall, you get larger fish that will migrate through
Yeah.
the system for spawning. The occasional kokanee salmon in the fall and brown trout, and then, rainbows in the springs and cutbows that come from the reservoir. But resident fish, it's everything from 8 inch, little 8 inch guys up to about 17 or 18 inch. And even though I don't that frequently kind of count or pay attention to it on Saturday, when we were fishing, I was kind of counting, and it was like 6 to 1 browns to rainbows, and then that fluctuates over the course of the summer. A lot of these fish, a lot of the brown trout in particular, move up into 11 Mile Canyon in the winter, and then as the water kind of heats up and raises, they drop back down into our property. So the fish density changes over the course of the season as well.
That's super neat. So they move around a lot, huh? Are they
They do.
chasing colder water? Is that what they're doing?
It's a really good question. We have temperature sensors upstream of us, and we have several temperature sensors and dissolved oxygen sensors on our property and downstream. And we try and find a correlation. I'm guessing they're able to find warmer water the closer they get to the dam. And that's the only thing that we can, in the wintertime, they're able to find warmer water with very little ice on it. And so that's the only thing that we've been able to come up with. Now, the interesting part is there used to be a big diversion, a concrete pour over that was in 11 Mile Canyon. And so a lot of the fish that would be moving through the system would get stuck at that low head
Yeah.
dam. That was removed 2 years ago. And so we've seen the fish moving through the system just visually, anecdotally, more in the last 2 years than we have since.
Yeah. Super interesting. What's an average day for an average angler on Abell?
Man, it's tough to say, but I had an okay angler on Saturday, and we were fishing with a dry dropper to start and very quickly went to a single dry, and we hooked around 20 fish by lunchtime. I would have called that a better than average day, but
Yeah.
there was a guy trip up here this week that 2 anglers caught, 40 some fish.
Darn good day.
And the beauty of it, as much as anglers don't want to hear this, is because it's not a managed fishery and because it's wild fish, there's days where it's tough, and
Yeah.
getting 2 or 3 fish is what happens.
That's on. Yeah.
But yeah, it fishes, it fishes the way Mother Nature kind of forces it to. And the grasshopper fishing on this property is as good as any place I've ever fished. And that's probably my favorite thing to do is fish large dry flies.
Huh. About what time of year do the hoppers start popping for you?
Late April, they'll be very small, and you'll have hoppers all the way into, late October, mid-October.
In spring. You're getting hoppers in the springtime.
Yeah, there's hoppers here right now.
Huh.
They're only half an inch long and they're little tiny, but they're around. And then come a month from now or three weeks, as you walk through the grass, they're just leaping in front of you. And then the hopper fishing gets very good. But, a size 14 Amy's ant on Saturday, fish are coming up and grabbing it. And the difference is here, Steve, on the hoppers, a lot of the fish eat them going downstream. So the fly will pass over the fish and they'll turn and follow it downstream. And on the hopper eats, they rarely get their whole head or even the top of the head out of their water. It's usually they approach the fly or the natural and they just, flare their gills, open their mouth and suck it in. And there's just a little swirl on the surface. And it's really interesting seeing how
Yeah.
it is relative to some of the other sections with similar conditions.
Even hoppers, they're not slashing away at those things, huh? They're really just sipping them.
A very, very gentle eat. And if someone hasn't seen it before, they think their fly's just getting sucked underwater. I mean, it's a very, very delicate take. And the rainbows will eat them a little bit more aggressively, but the browns, their head rarely comes out of the water to go over the fly.
Huh. That's so interesting. And so they chase it downstream. That's really common, huh?
I mean, I would say that 2/3 of the fish, 2/3 of the brown trout that eat the bigger flies. I mean, if it's a blueing olive or a trico or something, they just rise like a normal take. But
Yeah.
the fly will pass over their head, and you'll think that once it's 1 or 2 feet behind them, you'll think you're going to pick up to recast, and if you're patient, that fish will slowly turn down, kick its tail a couple times, and approach the fly and just slurp it without ever breaking the surface. Just slurp it right under.
And are you doing a lot of visual sight fishing so you can see that happening?
You'll find a fish that's rising a lot, and then once you pinpoint where the fish is rising and fish to it, it's very common to sight fish that way. But because the fish on average are smaller than places like Cheeseman Canyon or the Dream Stream, you're rarely walking and just looking for individual fish and then casting to that fish. But if you see a rise, you'll then be able to see the fish.
Okay. Let me ask you, this is just kind of a sidebar type of a question, but as you're working your way, swimming upstream and fishing these things, do you find that if you just keep pushing your way upstream, you're starting just to push a bunch of spook fish up ahead of you and the fishing slows down? Do you ever get out of the bank and hop back in, 50 yards farther up and start over again? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I never walk downstream on outside bends right next to the river, right? I take a wide berth around any outside bends where the fish are going to be piled up.
Yeah.
And, an interesting thing is if you hook a fish in a run, the browns on this property shake their heads a lot and they'll actually jump more than a lot of browns, but they shake their head a lot. So a lot of fish come unbuttoned, after you have them hooked. They, you know, even though they're smaller, you're not breaking them off. But because of the way they shake their head, it's something that's baffled me since we've been
Huh.
fishing this property. But as you're working your way upstream, I'll get into pools, fish a run. If you hook a fish, it'll put all the fish down for a few minutes. So if I want to continue fishing that run, I just wait a couple minutes and then they'll go right back to their normal
Really?
fishing. And then I'll usually hop out of the stream and walk around to the next pool, staying a little bit off the bank. But there's ospreys that are around frequently, and there's some white pelicans that have been, facetiously, they've been a real blessing to us. These white pelicans just wreak havoc in the river, and I think because of that, our fish are very skittish when the pelicans show up. So I try and spook them as little as possible and stay off the banks. And
With the pelicans, okay. Do you have 5280 angler? Do they fish on your property?
we do, yeah. They probably fish it as much or more than any other outfitter.
Okay. You probably met Jeremy Hamilton. I think his last
Oh
name's
yeah,
Hamilton.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
One of the funniest guys I've ever had on the podcast.
yeah. He's fantastic.
We did a show on your two other properties, Shawnee Meadows and Rawhide, a couple of years ago with him. And he told a very funny story, folks, if you want to go back and listen to that show about teasing a client. He said that they shipped these pelicans in on railroad cars and they
Yeah,
let them
right.
all go.
Yeah,
Yeah. And they had the lady going for a long time on it. So,
yeah. We're happy when those pelicans stay on Lake George and on 11 Mile.
yeah.
And in years past, well, their presence fluctuates. We see them all the time, but if they all stay up at 11 Mile and Spinney or down at Cheeseman, it's great. But they
Yeah.
do have a real a very meaningful impact on certain parts of the river. And so, they're a protected species. You can't really do anything about it. But,
Yeah.
you know, there's some like plastic owls on some fence posts that'll keep
Okay.
away until they realize they're fake. And then they don't, they don't care. But
So that's like a week solution, a week
yeah,
long solution, and then
yeah,
that's it.
exactly.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the hatch chart there. What are you seeing at different times of the year?
Yeah. So 3 times a year for the first 3 years we owned the property, we did a, macroinvertebrate sampling throughout. So we have the bugs identified seasonally down to the species level. And so, to give you an idea, like Baetis blueing olives start, depending on the year, late February to early March, and on cloudy days you get really good hatches. This year that hatch has been later and slightly less dense. Starting about now through middle to end of July, you've got tricos and you've got PMDs. It's not a huge PMD hatch. The trico hatch is very good. Baetis hatch is good. You know, not really hatching bugs, but the terrestrials in beetles, ants, the mouse fishing in low light conditioning is actually really good on the property. It doesn't even have to be dark. It just needs to be lower light. And of course the hopper fishing. And then as it goes into the fall, you've got other blueing olive species, that your fly would be imitating as a bluing olive. And yeah, PMDs, we've got some red quills. We've got the snowstones, the little black stone flies. We've got
Okay.
small golden stones. All, those are all driven by temps. So all of those are kind of leading up to and right through runoff. I'm going a little bit out of order on you, but yeah, it's, I think there's lots of crane flies. Like right now, there's crane flies, adult crane flies flying around because between the trout spawning and a pretty robust sucker population. Spring, like if you use eggs and worms, it fish, of course that fishes really well. I usually, if I'm going to fish an egg, just do a large dry fly with some sort of small egg behind it as a dropper,
Okay.
and that works.
They'll hammer that, huh? What's
Yep.
your favorite hopper pattern?
You know, the Schroeder's parachute hopper, in my opinion, is the best. It lands really softly. It sits slow in the water. Anglers of every skill level can see it.
Yeah.
It's my favorite by far, but there's a whole bunch of other, an Amy's ant. I usually cut the wing back on an Amy's ant, just so it's not such a high profile. You know, there's so many, like even the Dave's hopper, like the stuff that's older spun deer hair, and they work great.
Yeah.
But it's more about being accurate on size and presenting your fly well than anything. Like a Madam X works great, but if you're in the wrong size zone, or you've got drag,
Yeah.
or whatever the other circumstances might be, these fish, they just know what looks right and what doesn't.
Are you having to go down, to probably not with hoppers, but some of your other flies, you having to go down to 6, 7X to get these fish to take them?
Well, it's probably an indictment on my laziness in fishing, but I don't even own a spool of 7X no matter where I'm fishing. I've personally never used 6X here. I'm sure it's being done. I know there's plenty of people fishing 18s and 20s, plenty of the
Yeah.
guides, but I fish 5X fluorocarbon as my smallest. I fish size 18 probably as my smallest nymph. I would dry fly with, a 20 when the betas and tricos are coming off. If I have to use 6X to get through the eye of the fly, I will, but tippet refusals are just that's not, it's more about presentation and fly selection than tippet.
That's probably a function of the fact that you don't have hundreds of anglers pouring into your property every day like they do in other parts of the South Platte, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you are sight fishing and you make a drift to a fish, the tippet refusal or moving out of the way of the tippet is just not something that we see on the property.
How about that? There you go, folks. You want to fish the South Platte and have the benefits of some solitude here and not as many anglers. It sounds like a pretty good place to go. Well, let's shift gears for a minute. Tell us about Shawnee Meadows and Rawhide Ranch, your other two properties on the North Branch of the South Platte.
Yeah. And Jeremy may have talked some of this about it when you had him on, but
Mm-hmm.
the North Fork of the South Platte used to be, it starts on Kenosha Pass or right near Kenosha Pass. And it used to be a very small stream, 8 to 12 feet wide, high sinuosity, low gradient. So lots of meanders, lots of beaver ponds. And Denver Water in the late 40s through 1954 cut the Roberts Tunnel from Lake Dillon, so that's Blue River water, West Slope water, Colorado River tributary water, and they pull water through the Roberts Tunnel 20, it's either 24 or 27 miles to the North Fork of the South Platte. And when they were done with that tunnel, they cut a new river channel that was much straighter, much higher gradient, and much larger, with really no regard at the time for habitat. And so they filled in the old small channel, cut the new channel. And so for what that would be now, 70, 71, 72 years, it's required a lot of effort to fix it. And our very first project with Freestone Aquatics was working on a property that was called the Farmers Union at the time, which is now Rawhide Ranch. And the big thing there is being able to manage around the flows, because a low flow might be 8 or 9 CFS and a high
Oh,
flow might be as high as, I mean, it got to 1400 in 2015, but a high flow really is about 750 to 850.
8 to 9 CFS to 750. That's the
Yep,
range.
that's the range. It's wild.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, to give you an idea, today it's running like at 370 CFS, and it's crystal clear because you're bringing in all of that just gin clear Blue River water that's been sitting in Lake Dillon.
Yeah.
The North Fork is about 42 miles of river from its headwaters to the confluence with the South Platte at Strontia Springs. And, they're very good fisheries. There's, 4 or 5 ranches along the length of that 42 miles that you can fish, and a fair bit of public water on the downstream end of it. It's all owned by Denver Water. It's really good access for the public. There is some Forest Service ground, so the public does, can go fish it without fishing on someone's property. You know, unlike Abel, on the North Fork, you do have to stock some fish because there's some heavy metals due to historical mining. And so that's a little bit of the management of the fishery. But really, when we started working in the North Fork, I started guiding in the North Fork in 1992. The water management through the tunnel has changed over the years. So, the habitat has had to change because it's high gradient. When it used to get 200 or 300 CFS, it was still fine. But now when it's at 500, 600, 700 CFS, you've got to have a way to slow down the water. So we've redone about 14 miles of the 42 miles of the entire North Fork.
Wow.
Across maybe 10 or 12 different parcels of land.
Wow.
And yeah, they're really good fisheries. It's predominantly nymph fishing and streamer fishing, but on a given day, the dry fly fishing can be very good. And yeah, I mean, it tends to be a little bit, there's more cliffs and a little bit more striking scenery than maybe the more kind of traditionally Western, like you would see at Abel. Highway 285 runs more or less right next to most,
I've
a
been
lot
there.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's great. They're wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's see. Rawhide has 2 miles of river. Shawnee has about a mile. And we have Rawhide split into 3 sections, and Shawnee is split into 2 sections.
And aren't you, Jeremy was talking about there's some really big fish that you guys have put in these two ranches. Is that still the case?
Yeah. I mean, there are some incredibly big fish. When under our management and how we like the river to fish, we want it to be as close to a natural experience as possible. So we stock everything from 6-inch fish all the way up to in the high teens. We don't introduce any fish that are giant, but under the management of the fisheries, they tend to grow pretty big.
Yeah.
Part of the reason, what we realized about, well, I guess it's 20 years ago now, is that the best way to get these fish to grow really fast is we stock tons of little fish, and the medium and larger size fish just feast on them.
Oh, really?
That wasn't our intention when we did it, but we were just trying to have a good, well-rounded fishery, and we
Right.
started getting on Rawhide after we did the first 2 sections of river work. We started getting natural reproduction, so spawning fish,
Oh, good.
the whole thing. And after we would electrofish it, we'd wonder why these small fish weren't around in any level of abundance. And then you watch it enough and you see these big fish just chasing them. And so the fish get really big very fast after they get carnivorous and start eating other trout.
Super interesting. Well, shifting gears a little bit, and speaking of stream restoration, how do you design a trout stream? Like what's it sounds like designing a golf course, but I don't know. How does it happen? Like you show up, you talk to the landowner, get some ideas of what they're looking for, come back with a proposal. How does all that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when we started, we just had my partner and I just had a vision, kind of like what the process would look like, right? The industry was kind of in its infancy. We only had really only 3 competitors in all of the Western U.S. And we had a customer at the time, the current owner of Rawhide, who told us, let's go through the permitting process, let's work on this, and let's see how it works. And so we looked at it as a partnership with him, not as a customer, you know,
Yeah.
relationship. And so we started designing the river based around what we thought were the objective, his objectives, and still making it look natural. The hardest thing in our industry is doing work that withstands the variety of flows and ice and floods and all of that,
Yeah.
but still looks natural. And so I would say that that's one of the things we take the most pride in, is that, whether it's building riffles or pools or whatever, we want it to look to the casual observer's eye that Mother Nature built it. And so to answer your original question, we do projects in 2 phases. We come and evaluate the current fishery through a number of metrics, whether it's bug life, gradient, width and depth, and then we study a few other things. We take a three-dimensional survey of the channel so we can model different flows through it at existing and proposed conditions. And then we meet with the landowner and find out what they have as a vision for their property. Sometimes they want slower water and sometimes the river doesn't want slower water. So you've got to work through that process. You can kind of nudge Mother Nature's hand a little bit, but you're definitely, Mother Nature's telling you what's going to happen there. And even if you push too hard, she's going to correct it pretty quick. So
Is that a hard conversation with some of the landowners?
early in our career, it probably was a little bit harder, but our portfolio and experience is such that, I don't want to make a river do something. I can only work within its boundaries. And so usually by the time we explain that, most of our landowners, they're pretty sophisticated, smart people, and they completely get it. Something like they might want to build their house in a certain spot. And so they want a pool nearer their house. And a lot of
Sure.
times we can accommodate something like that. But, you know, you can't turn, for instance, you can't turn a high gradient river into the Teton River or a spring creek. It's just, you just can't do it. And,
Yeah.
or, the real common one, Steve, in our industry is you show up to like a low elevation, warm water piece of property and someone wants to make it a trout fishery.
Yeah.
On occasion, we have to be the bearer of bad news that like spending the money isn't just, I mean, it could be a great smallmouth fishery or something,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be
Bison
a trout
bass.
fishery. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's been a wonderful career. We're 21 years in business, I think, this year
Doing that?
doing that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we started in late, well, we started in early 05, I think, and then we did the first section of Rawhide in late 05 and 06, and then we've since done the remaining 2 miles of Rawhide and a whole bunch of other properties. But we've worked in every major drainage in the state, most every drainage in Wyoming, lots in Montana. I would say our first project that was our real feather in our cap that we still remain really proud of is we designed the improvements to the San Juan River from Navajo Dam through the quality water section.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, and I think that was all the way back maybe in my years are going to be wrong, but like 08 or 09 or something like that.
Aren't there 18,000 fish per mile in the first 4 miles below Navajo?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's an absurd number. When we were doing, on that river and when we've done work on other real high density rivers, when you can't really electrofish them, you rely on state data, or we will snorkel the rivers and just do visual observation. And it's crazy. And you're able to get very close to fish when you're snorkeling compared to if you're above the water and in a drift boat or,
Really?
yeah,
Super interesting.
yeah. There's more fish in that section, well, certainly than any other section of river we've ever worked on.
Anything I've ever heard of anywhere.
Yeah.
It's the most I've ever heard of.
Yeah. It's been years since we've been back down there, but we've worked on the upper San Juan on the Colorado side in a number of locations and, other tributaries to the San Juan. But that was our first, kind of big non-private project. And our company mostly does private land, 80% of our work is private landowner.
Do you ever work with TU on projects?
We do. We're working with TU on a project now. We did a project on the Fraser River with Northern
Nice.
Water, Denver Water, TU, and some other stakeholders. We've done a few of those projects. Yeah, we work with TU a fair bit,
Oh, very good.
but oftentimes on the public work, it takes 3 to 10 years to get a project from vision to build.
Real 3 to 10 years. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. There's a project that we didn't do it, but there was a project that was just done that was probably a 20 year in the making project that was
How
just
come?
complete.
Why so long?
We've got a lot of interested parties. A lot of people have opinions and a lot of strong opinions, and then of course getting a project funded can be really difficult and strenuous. But the Windy Gap bypass project, which was reconnecting the Colorado River around Windy Gap Reservoir, That project was at least 10 years in the making, and I bet it was really more like 15.
And you say a lot of people interested. So do you have to have town hall meetings and ranchers getting everybody on board? Is it that kind of thing?
Yes, lots of town hall meetings,
Really?
lots of city council or town council, lots of, representatives from Denver Water. Well, in that project, lots of Denver Water representatives, Northern Water representatives, Trout Unlimited National, State Council, and then a whole bunch of irrigation and water management companies and entities from further down the drainage. I mean, that one and other projects that we've done in that same area have, at a given meeting, you might have 30 or 40 different stakeholders, certainly every bit of 20. And it takes years to get everybody plus local fisheries biologists from Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the Forest Service and BLM. Yeah, there's a lot of folks involved.
All those guys. Everybody's got an opinion, huh?
That's right.
Are you good with conflict?
You know, I think I'm good at listening.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's the secret, huh?
Well, I think I'm good at listening. I try and listen to everything they say, and then we do as much incorporating it as possible. But really, a lot of it sometimes is the interests can't all align. And so then it becomes a maybe a few weeks, but sometimes a few years of trying to figure out where the give and take is to get those projects. Because really all we're all working towards is trying to improve a fishery like the West Slope water for, without going too far down the rabbit hole, Steve, is
Yeah.
that project's important because that's west flowing Colorado River water and its tributaries that gets pulled and diverted to the Front Range through a series of tunnels. So these rivers, like the Fraser River, for instance, where a low flow should be around 40 CFS and a high temperature should be around 63 to 65, a low flow now might be 7 or 8 CFS and a high temp might be 75, 78 degrees.
Oh, really? On the Fraser?
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. But you can do things like narrow the stream channel to make it fit the new hydrology. The first project we did for Northern Denver Trout Unlimited, the group that they have all kind of assembled through is called the Learning by Doing Committee. And so we did the first Learning by Doing project. I think that was in 2016 or 17. That was on the Fraser. We saw a 400% increase in wild trout populations within 1 year of doing that project. And it's been not because we did it, but it's been a great success. And they've been able to use it as a pilot project for several other projects through the drainage. And we've done a couple more of them for them.
That's fantastic. Okay, I want to shift gears again
Sure.
and hear a little bit about this brokerage business that you have. So I was on your website and I saw a ranch for a small, tidy sum of $39.5 million.
Yeah, that's Elk Mountain Cattle Company.
Yeah. What kind of a guy buys a 39? I mean, I can take a lot of really nice vacations for $39 million. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a good question. And I can tell you who, maybe not the buyer for that ranch specifically, but who a buyer for a property like that is, right? You're talking about around 30,000 deeded acres and then 80 some thousand leased acres. And so let's say you had a cattle operation in West Texas or Kansas or somewhere else in the West where you overwintered cows, you can run. That's in South Park. That property actually surrounds part of 11 Mile and Spinney Reservoir.
Oh.
And that's a multi-generational family ranch, and they're phenomenal stewards of the land. They have buffalo and cows on the property, and so if you were buying that, one thing you can bank on is that the land appreciation is going to be good over time. It's in a high demand area, and if you have a big cattle operation, it supports a lot of head, and so a property like that. But then again, being a guy that has owned several and still owns ranches, you can take a lot of trips, a lot of places. But if you come across a place that's so unique and it's a one-on-one, or a very unique, you don't really want to go other places. We've owned fishing lodges and I've worked at fishing lodges and leased fishing lodges in Alaska and Honduras and I'm sure other places. And I've probably fished in somewhere close to 20 countries, and I still enjoy doing that stuff. But, there's another thing to be able to go out and get your hands dirty and work on your own place and improve it and maintain it and kind of be more in touch with it than just visiting. I can also say, it's for people that are fortunate enough to have a large financial portfolio, a lot of it is keeping their portfolio diverse. And, so a lot of our customers are everything from ranchers to, to tech guys that have made a lot of money to whatever. And they want a diverse portfolio, and the property appreciation's been very good. So it's a good place to place money.
Interesting. Do you find that some people, they're kind of window shopping and after you talk to them a while, they're kind of like, yeah, ranching's not for me? Or do you feel like people come into this with eyes open and they really know what they're getting into?
Yeah, Steve, you're asking really good questions. Yeah, that one's a good question, because the PC answer would be, yeah, everybody's pretty eyes wide open, but the real honest answer is it takes you know, some real constitution to run a ranch, especially if you're doing it on your own, right?
And we're talking about a working ranch here, not just like I want to buy a trout stream ranch.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and even if you want to buy a trout stream ranch, like if I've got 3 miles of river at Abel, that means I've got at least 6 miles of fence, and there's elk running through it, all the time. You're fixing fence, you're spraying weeds, and so, there is a small contingent of property owners that they have a romantic idea of what owning a ranch is like,
yeah,
because 70% of the time it's pure romance, and 30% of the time it's, busted up
sweat.
knuckles and sweat and
Yeah,
long days and freezing your butt off. But yes, some people come in window shopping. But honestly, I think if a broker and a brokerage firm is doing a good job, we don't want anyone to be surprised and we'd rather
yeah,
have someone not buy a ranch than buy a ranch and then hate it a few years later.
right.
And that's one of the things, if I were to brag on our firm a little bit, Steve, is, we're for the first 7 or 8 years of our brokerage business, we specialized in off-market transactions. We've had a really a nice track record of success in helping people that maybe weren't interested in selling, but they had like very specific wants. They still wanted to be able to hunt elk, or they still wanted to be able to fish or whatever. And whether it's on that property or other properties we own or lease, we were able to accommodate those things.
Interesting.
So that was, a good part of our early success was being able to get a niche where we could do off-market
So
transactions.
you're going and convincing ranchers, hey, have you thought about selling? And here's some things we can do for you to make that enjoyable for you.
Yeah, either legit ranchers or gentleman ranchers or, weekenders I mean, we do kind of pride ourselves on being able to solve problems for
Sounds like
sellers.
it.
And and then once you do a few of those, the referral business is great in real estate. And so we're a really high touch firm. I'm not a broker. My two partners are brokers, and we have two brokers that work for us. Because of being in between the outfitting business and the guiding business for more than 30 years, we've got a lot of relationships with folks that we're able to call on, whether it's as experts or help us
Yeah,
evaluate things. And so I would say that the thing we pride ourselves on is that our customer service and our knowledge base and our access to experts is really, really good.
yeah. Okay, so let's say I'm buying a $10 million ranch. Is there a rule of thumb of how much capital I'm going to need to run the thing after that? Like 10, 20% a year, or what is it?
Yeah. Well, again, another good question. So it could be everything from zero, like it may actually throw off enough money that you're putting money in the bank. A lot of folks, especially in a few recent years, have been buying ranches in cash without debt on them.
Okay.
And then the ag operation or the fishing and hunting and ag operation more than pays for the maintenance. And then there's bottom line profit to it. But usually, with reasonable interest rates and a decent ag operation, you're probably not coming out of pocket. If you're buying it right and the ranch is priced right and you're running it
Yeah,
right, it should be carrying its costs.
really.
Yeah.
Even like 39 million bucks, I can like recover that.
Well, you have the $39 million asset 100% of the time.
Yeah,
So you're always going to get your 39 million back unless there's some crazy market correction.
yeah. when you sell it. Yeah.
And then, like, so let's say you're making 3 to 7% a year in a land appreciation, and you don't have a note on it, and you're running. I'm not giving specifics on Elk Mountain,
Yeah.
but let's say you're running a few thousand cow calf head or 1,000
Yeah.
pair or something. Oh, you're doing plenty well enough to support the staff and support the operation and
Run the
make a
operation.
little bit of money. Yep.
No kidding. And in Colorado, would you say that you can support more cattle per acre than you can in some other states? Is it more lush in Colorado because it's farther south than, say, a Montana? Or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think if you average us out, that's probably a question I should know the answer to, Steve. But the diversity in landscape and topography is so vast in Colorado
Yeah.
that, like, a state like Montana doesn't really have a South Park or a San Luis Valley to the extent. So, like, if you had cows on the Front Range in Elizabeth, Parker, you know, near Colorado Springs, you can run cows year round on your property and it has good grass growth, even if you're not irrigating. But, in the high country, you have some pretty tough winters. And
Yeah.
so, but like North Park, for instance, has some of the highest protein grass and best growing season, fastest growth during growing season of anywhere. And so it just depends
Huh.
on the location. You know, I know there's fantastic data to support
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
answer your
That's all right.
question, but
I'd probably put it on your spot.
like, if you think about Wyoming, the whole south half of Wyoming and the east half of Wyoming, other than really the northwest corner, you're not supporting many animal units per acre on that ground.
Yeah.
Colorado definitely supports more than Wyoming on average.
Yeah. Super interesting. Okay. So how do you say I want to buy a ranch and I'm really interested in the trout fishing and the hunting. How do you assess how good the hunting and the fishing is? How does that happen?
Yeah.
And do you need some volunteers to go fish it?
Yes. Yes. We're always looking for volunteers. So if you came to me and said, elk is my number one priority, and I'm just making, a hypothetical. And if you said, and I want to be in Denver and I want to be able to drive up within 2.5 hours, and then you gave us a budget or an approximate budget, we would identify between on market and off market deals, we'd identify a number of different opportunities. And then we would say, okay, so the elk hunting might be the elk hunting might be like a B or a B minus, and the fishing, let's say fishing is close to equally important, but the fishing might only be a C minus.
Hmm.
Okay, we'll look at another one. But, the data out there is so good that most the buyers and the realtors have access to data both on elk populations, fishing, all the above. But where you really kind of chisel down and show your value is having relationships with experts. And so we rely on, the fishing side and the fishery side, we've got that taken care of in-house. And a few of our brokers I would consider to be kind of top tier big game experts. So, but then it's really spending a considerable amount of time on the property at multiple times of the year, because the last thing you want to do is sell someone a property who loves elk hunting and they're an archery hunter and there's only elk there in May, June, July, and then the
Yeah.
rest of the year they've migrated somewhere else. So
That's a problem. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's relying on experts and a lot of boots on the ground and studying the heck out of the properties so you know every corner of them.
And you were telling me a couple of weeks ago that like a C plus fishing property is actually pretty good because parts of the South Platte are B minus stuff that people think so great.
I mean, if the best river in the world is an A plus, then
Yeah.
a C plus has to be really good. And I think my scale doesn't really resonate with people very much because they think a C is like poor, but you know, the very best section river in Colorado isn't even an A on my scale, right? I mean,
Interesting.
you know,
Huh.
Cheeseman Canyon, I'd probably call like a B plus or maybe an A minus. I mean, maybe, but
Maybe.
if
Yeah.
you think the very best river in Argentina, the best trout stream in Alaska, or the best fish area in New Zealand, you can't do better than an A plus. And so if that's my bookend on the one side,
Okay.
a C minus river is pretty darn good. And so,
So interesting.
yeah, I mean, I probably should have a way better scale or have a Colorado specific scale, but that's the way I've always, when I'm evaluating a place
Yeah.
for myself or for someone else, you're comparing it against the very best. And if it's even noteworthy against that, it's good, but the grade still might be a
Yeah.
C minus.
Super interesting. Okay, just one more question. So these ranches are all so unique. How in the world do you ever set a price for a ranch? There can't be a comparable, is there? It's not like I got a 4-bedroom house right next door. I can say should be the same as this one.
Yep, another fantastic question. On land, on certain parts of land, there's direct comparables, right? So if you have ranch land, there's always a similar enough transaction that you can extrapolate a value that's close-ish. On river, that's where expertise comes in, and on hunting. So, like, I had a broker tell me yesterday that he thinks that a section of the upper Colorado River is worth $5 million a mile. So by the time you're breaking down to come to a value, you go X number of acres, X number of flood irrigated acres at this value, 2 miles of the Colorado River at 5 million a mile, plus the home improvements, and you figure out what those are worth. And then, there's either a small bump in price or a small reduction in price based off the quality of the hunting or the fishing. But a lot of times, and I can speak to it like from Abel's perspective, is the ranch had a fair bit of deferred maintenance and required a lot of elbow grease, but not that much money to improve it. And the value change is significant, well beyond outpacing the market appreciation. And so, I think what I would always recommend to folks is, rather than worrying about buying a lot of land, buy unique land. And
That's a good tip. Wow, that's great.
buy unique land. And even if it's unique, like rocky outcroppings, or it's unique in its scenery, or unique, the demand for uniqueness really doesn't fluctuate or go down like the demand for very replicatable land, like farmland. So, and of course, water, as we've all seen growing up out west, water's gotten to the point, the whole old saying of, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting, or whatever,
Yeah.
is really true. And water's gotten to be so commoditized out west that even if you have a little pond on your property, just a little tiny pond, it's really meaningful to the value and measurable. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably a little bit of a rambling answer, but
That's a good answer. Are there any water rights lawyers in Colorado?
oh, yeah, many, many, many of them.
I've heard there's more in Colorado than the rest of the country combined. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, and I can tell you part of why it's so important is, unlike a state like Montana, in Colorado, you can actually separate the water from the land. So like if you bought a ranch, I'll use Abel as an example. If you were to buy Abel and it had its historical water rights with it, and let's say you had a cattle operation, but irrigating the meadows wasn't of importance to you, since it's a east flowing river that goes through Denver, all you have to do is leave it in the stream, sell it to a downstream user, and then there's the ability to recapture it between the reservoirs and other head gates. So the natural pipeline's already in place. So we have, between water court, water engineers, and water lawyers, it's very sophisticated in Colorado. Whereas Montana and some other states, you're able to lease that water to a user, but you're not actually able to deed it separately and partition it off the land.
Huh. So you could actually buy a ranch and say, I'm just going to deed the water rights to somebody and make some money on that?
Yeah, you can't. I mean, in Colorado, you very much can.
Okay, super interesting. Well, how in the world did all this get started for you? You're a fifth generation Coloradan. Not sure if I said that right. You've been in Colorado 5 generations, you guys, going back to what, the 1890s? Is that right?
It'd have to be a little bit before that. My great great grandfather was the first elected undersheriff in Arapahoe County, and pretty sure that was 1894. And so it had to be in the 1860s. I actually know that. I just can't think of the time. But,
Wow.
you know, I come from a ranching family, and as much as I like horses, they don't like me. And I realized that at a very young age. And no matter how hard I tried, and under the great tutelage of my grandfather, I was just never going to be a horseman.
Is that right? Why not? What's wrong? I mean, I'm not arguing with you, but I spent 5 hours on a horse going up in the Wind River Range this summer, and man, that was an eye opener. That hurt.
No, I mean, everything from just trying to move him around on my grandpa's ranch and get him to cooperate with me to getting bucked off constantly to I just didn't have the horseman's constitution, I guess.
Yeah,
And so early in life, where my grandfather lived was close to after he sold his place and got older in life and needed to be close to town. I still lived with him part time, and he lived on a where Bear Creek and the South Platte come together in Littleton in South Denver.
cool.
And so I would walk out his door and go walk around, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old and using a spinning rod and catch fish and it just fascinated me. And so honestly, like I started guiding when I was 13 and I've been doing it ever since. And it's so I've tried structuring everything I'm doing around rivers and
Yeah,
being outside.
you kind of made a life out of it, didn't you?
Yeah,
And
that
that's
was the goal.
all right. So I got to ask you this. I read somewhere on your bio or something that a private equity firm found you while in high school and asked you to come to South Carolina and open some order stores. I'm not sure when you got hooked, but two fly shops.
Yeah, that's right.
How did that happen?
I'd been guiding illegally, mind you. I didn't know this, but the outfitter that hired me, I had no idea that you have to be 18 years old to guide in the state of
Oh,
Colorado.
whoops. Nobody listens to this show, so that won't get out. So
Yeah, and I'm sure the statute of limitations has long
I
passed.
think you're okay. Yeah.
But, I was working for a really good outfitter, a fantastic fly shop that used to be in Denver. And I had, I was like going into the summer between my junior and senior years, and a client of ours and a guide one of our guides had decided to open a fly shop in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And they asked me if I was interested in joining. So the day after I graduated high school in 1998, I moved down there. We opened two fly shops. They've since opened up several more. It was a private equity group funded by doctors. And that was the deal. I'd never, like I said, coming from a ranching family, it's not like there was any vacations. I had no idea what saltwater looked
Yeah, I
like.
was going to say, you had to look up what a redfish was.
Really, I had no idea. I had read enough in Fly Fisherman magazine that red fishing could have been in South Carolina or it could have been in India, and I had no idea. I just thought it was something I was never going to be able to do or see or experience. So
Yeah.
I drove it straight through the day after I graduated and went down there, and I ended up coming back because my mom got sick, but that was,
Oh,
that brought me back to Colorado. And really, it's not a question that you asked, but that first exposure to saltwater is more or less what has shaped all of my adult angling since.
really? Huh.
When it comes to fishing, it's all I think about. And
Saltwater.
saltwater. Yep.
Really? Huh.
Yep. You know, you figure you guide for 32 years in Colorado, like it's not that there's not something left that I'm excited about because I still get very pumped about it. But I know this, I rarely look at the weather conditions in Colorado, but I can tell you that in the last 3 days, all 3 days, I've looked at the weather in Key West, so
Okay.
because I'm just dreaming about what's happening down there and how the tarpon
Yeah.
is moving and if there's permit tails sticking up and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, so you like permit the best?
Oh, I didn't have an opinion. I thought every fish, I didn't discriminate, but I think that the tarpon is the greatest fish swimming on earth,
Really? Huh.
and I will fish for anything. I just caught a blacktip shark a few weeks ago on a fly rod and thought it was awesome. But no, I think tarpon fishing is my favorite fishing, hands down.
Yeah. Tell me about that black tip. What were you doing when you
I
got
was
him?
tarpon fishing, and
Oh, yeah.
and I had a tarpon fly on. We were fishing 40 pound, and so we were tarpon fishing, and this black tip was following a group of three tarpon down a kind of a reef edge, and I put the fly in front of him, and he just kind of came up and sipped it a little bit differently than they normally would, and I hooked him, accidentally, perfect to where the fly was just in his teeth, and the tippet wasn't able to touch it, and we landed the fish.
Oh, you did?
Oh yeah, and blacktips jump and spin and fight like
Cool.
crazy.
Really?
Oh, and they're rocket ships, and that fish was probably a 40-pound fish, and it kicked my ass up and down, and it was fantastic. And so, yeah, I fish in 2 permit tournaments, and those are kind of the bookends to my fishing season in the saltwater. And between then, I just try and tarpon fish as much as possible.
Huh. That's fantastic. And you hooked this blacktip on the teeth, and when he was jumping and everything, he didn't shake that hook somehow?
Didn't shake. I mean, he jumped and spun and jumped and flipped 7 or 8 times.
Oh my gosh.
And at one point, when he ran directly back at me, Steve, he was running directly at me, and I had so much slack in my line that I have no idea how the fish didn't come off.
Right.
But he must have been moving so fast that there was enough drag on the line that it was just
Yeah.
getting the fly in his mouth.
Yeah.
And yeah, got him right to the boat. And I've hooked plenty of them. I've certainly never landed one without a wire leader, and it was
Yeah.
great.
So when you cast him, you thought, oh, what the hell? I'm just going to throw and see what happens here. He'll probably bite my leader in half, and that'll be it. But I got to try anyway.
I didn't even think he would eat. Honestly, I thought
Yeah.
all I was doing is I had blown the shot at the tarpon right in front of him, and I was just making a practice shot, like trying to get accustomed to the wind direction. When I'm on the bow, I'm always like, I'll find a leaf or something floating and just take a couple shots, just like trying to
Yeah.
stay sharp. And I put the fly in front of him, and he just came right over and grabbed it.
Fed him a fly, and he ate it.
Yep. Yeah, he ate a purple tarpon toad. It was fantastic.
I didn't know blacktips jump like I've seen videos of makos. People
Yep.
have caught makos, and they go crazy, right? But
Yep.
I mean, I've caught not fly fishing, but I've caught some bull sharks and things like that. They just pull like heck. But when I was a kid, I hooked a 4-foot sand shark, and it took me down to the knot, of my spinning rod off the beach in Florida. I mean, I couldn't believe how strong a shark was.
Yeah, they're amazing. And
Yeah.
and black tips, it's not like I've caught all that, caught plenty of. I've hooked a few bull sharks. I've caught plenty of lemon sharks, and hooked
Oh,
plenty of black tips too. But usually they come off like right away. But when we're running on the flats boat, we'll see black tips launch out of the water and spin on 3 jump fairly often. Yeah,
just having fun out there, aren't they?
yeah, just living life.
I guess. Man. All right. Before we go, what's your favorite shore lunch? Think about your guiding days. What was your favorite shore lunch you used to cook up for people?
My favorite shore lunch was making fajitas, and that's not that great of a lunch, but I would pre-make, and I still do on occasion, pre-make chicken and steak, and then instead of salad, I always like doing a couscous, like
Yeah.
couscous with tomatoes and stuff in it, and then caprese salad, and then always
Oh,
a very good cookie. And the separator, I think, as goofy as it might sound, the separator is cooking, whether it's corn or flour tortillas, heating them while you're making the lunch and getting them a little bit crispy. And that, for me,
ah.
that was the home run, because it's easy and it's easy cleanup, but it's really good.
Yeah. Just heating up those flour tortillas, huh?
Yep.
How about that? And okay, back to Colorado and Abell Ranch. Sounds like you're not feeding people there. Am I right? There's not a dinner served at night or anything, so they got to go somewhere else nearby.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. What's your favorite nearby place to get something to eat and maybe something to drink?
Yeah. That one's easy too. There's a biker bar in the town of Florissant called the Thunderbird, and it's fantastic. I mean, I'll eat at the Thunderbird tonight for sure. And
Really?
um, if I stay up here on the weekend, I'll eat 2 out of 3 nights there. Their burgers are very good, and
Yeah.
it's got a lot of character. There's a giant totem pole out front, and yeah, it's a wonderful place. That's an easy one. And if you're day fishing, the beauty of the ranch being close to Lake George is there's a very good barbecue place in Lake George.
Oh,
Yeah, so
how about that?
those are the
There
2
you
options.
go.
Yep,
So just don't touch those Harleys out in front of that biker bar, though, huh?
that's right. Everybody's pretty friendly though.
Are they? Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Man, it's great having you on the show, Clint. Thanks for making time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. How can people get in touch with you? They want to hear more, maybe if they want to buy a ranch or inquire on some of your other businesses.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad at plugs, but Confluence Land Company is our real estate business. Freestone Aquatics is our river restoration business, and Flyfish Colorado, flyfishcolorado.org will get you access to all of our fishing properties, and then our partner outfitters, you just book through them.
Okay.
Each outfitter that works with us through our portal, has access to see every section river we have live and see what availability is. So it's painless and easy.
Yeah.
And that's the easiest way to get in touch with us.
Okay. There you go, folks. Thanks everybody for listening. And Clint, wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And folks, you can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig@destinationanglerpodcast.com. If you like the show, please share it with a buddy. That's how we spread the word. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain, a really great little band out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Hope you enjoy the show. We'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.